welcome to the Voicer podcast. Thank you for joining me today. We are continuing a Bible study about the book of Esther. And I've called the Bible study From Hadassah to Esther, Becoming a Esther for this generation. And that was the name that the Lord laid on my heart a couple months ago when I was worshiping God. He just said to me, From Hadassah to Esther. And I was like, what? And so I spoke about this subject in a women's conference, and I felt I need to go a little bit deeper to study the book of Esther because I was starting to see that it gives us clues on how we can live the new covenant life. It's not just a historic book about how the Feast of Purim was started, but it gives us a picture of how we are to live when we are freed and when we are made royal, how we are to live as Christians. So, to be overcomers and not be overpowered by anything that comes into our lives. So, you can just take the book of Esther and you can put it on repeat on your life. Just repeat it over and over again, and we will go deeper into that, what that means. Just to repeat it over and over in your life, and you will be overcomer and never overpowered by anything that comes to you. So I'm right now in this process that I want to learn more, and thank you for joining me to learning more. And my biggest concern in life is that right now that in this book there is Hadassah, who was also called Esther, but when she was Hadassah, only the Jewish girl Hadassah, she could not have had the results what Esther had to freeing people, to overpowering the enemies of the Jews. But, and even, I don't know if she ever could have gone before the king and stayed alive. But Esther could. Hadassah could not, but Esther could. So, just to become that Esther who has that position and can do things that change the course of people's lives. So, you can watch the first part, why was Vashti banished, to learn a little bit more about how to keep yourself in the presence of Jesus. And today we're going more into Hadassah and Mordecai in chapter 2. So, now the old queen Vashti was banished, and the king needed a new queen in this story. And it was not be done by alliance, by two nations being just making a contract, and a new queen picked from and some other nation or a royal family. But it was to be anyone who she just had to be beautiful, and she had to be had the queenly qualities in her life. And so a position open to one beautiful lady who would be that kind of a lady. And she needed to be loyal and submissive and obey the king, and also, contrary to Vashti, be thankful for the position and be promoting peace in the kingdom as the king was in war or in other duties. So, not because of her she already had position, but because she was taken and given that position. So let's read a little bit from Esther 2 and verse 6 and 7. Uh, this talks about Mordecai and his family, the background of Esther. Mordecai's family had been among those with King Joachim of Judah, had been exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. This man had a very beautiful and lovely young cousin, Hadassah, who was also called Esther. When her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her into his family and raised her as his own daughter. Okay, so the background of Mordecai and Esther, that they were exiled from Israel, from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. And so they had a history. They had a national identity. There was a community of Jewish people in Susa, and some of them had already gone from other parts of the kingdom of King Xerxes, had already gone back to Jerusalem, but some had stayed in the nations. So she was an orphan, and Mordecai adopted her to gave her a family. And She was raised in a family. We can learn from Mordecai that he was a devout Jew, and so he probably raised Esther as a devout Jew also. And we can see later in the story that she knew the Jews in Susa and knew what they would do in difficult situation, and so she was connected with the whole community there. And but she was adopted orphan, so that was also her identity was a Jewish girl, Hadassah, the name that meant myrtle tree, but also her identity was an adopted orphan. And I don't know if you know anyone who has been adopted. They have, if they were adopted from a difficult situation, they have this thankfulness about what happened to them and what they could have been without the adoption. And so they can keep that thankfulness in their heart maybe better than people who have never experienced that. And I can tell you who is one adopted orphan. I am an adopted orphan, and you are an adopted orphan if you are a Christian. Because it says in the book of Galatians that we were adopted into the family of God. He took us as his children because of the cross and Jesus, the redemption. We are now, through faith, the heirs of that kingdom and the promises God made to Abraham. So we are adopted orphans, and that needs to be in our identity strongly. And just adopted uh, from evil, from this world. And it chapter 2 mentions that two times that Hadassah, Esther, was adopted by Mordecai. So that because it mentions it two times, it means that it was her identity. And that's what needs to be in the identity of every Christian who wants to have favor before the king. You need to know that you are an adopted orphan and to have that in your identity and be thankful for that adoption. Be thankful for what Mordecai, what the rescuer did for you, what Jesus did for you. And building on the wisdom of the first episode, Hadassah never forgot to be thankful. You can see it in the book of Esther that she never forgot to be thankful. She never forgot why she was in her position and what she would have been without the adoption of Mordecai, because you can see later on that she got favor. She got favor everywhere she went. So let's and she because she knew her position, that she was an adopted orphan, she obeyed Mordecai, and later on she obeyed the eunuch who was in charge of the harem. So let's read in verse 8 and 9. As a result of the king's decree, Esther, along with many other young women, was brought to the king's harem at the fortress of Susa and placed in the Heggai's care. Heggai was very impressed with Esther and treated her kindly. He quickly ordered a special menu for her and provided her with beauty treatments. He also assigned her servants' maids especially chosen for the king's palace, and he moved her and her maids into the best places in the harem. So, even before the beauty treatments, even before ever having a royal dress or royal crown, she had favor. She had favor because of her attitudes and because of the identity she had. And now we have to look a little bit about Mordecai, because Mordecai was the one who raised her up. And to be raising young women to be beautiful, you had to raise them so that they had not been having sleepless nights, having burdens, having heard every kind of evil thing and living under that, just to keep their hearts soft and not hard, and not be too harsh on her, and just he was working on her heart and on her attitudes, this Mordecai. And Hadassah was the work of Mordecai. She was completely the work of Mordecai. She had to submit to his guidance. She had to submit to his wisdom, and her job was to submit to him. And even later on, she listened to him. And so she didn't have this, oh, I'm going to have my life, I'm going to change my life. No, but she knew without Mordecai, she would have been dead, or at least burdened as an orphan in that age. So Mordecai took a good care of her so that she could be beautiful as a young woman. And let's say Queen Vashti, the queen before her who was banished, she was beautiful, so beautiful that a king wanted to show her off. But Hadassah was beautiful even before the beauty treatments. She was queen material even before any royal position. Uh, she was beautiful because her heart was beautiful, because her attitude was beautiful. And that was, everybody saw that attitude and that heart, and they were looking for it, that kind of heart and that kind of attitude. And people in this world, in workplaces and in different places, are looking at that kind of attitude in people. So if you have that, you can have favor. So we all have these Mordecais in our lives. So Mordecai is a spirit-filled person in a life of a Christian who wants you and me to live without burdens and be beautiful from the inside out. So they can be pastors or mentors or whoever is a voice in your life who wants you to live without burdens and brings advice, brings the spirit of God into your life. And we can think that, okay, well, the spirit of God just leads me. I don't even need any Mordecais. But to be an Esther in this generation, you need a Mordecai. You need Mordecais in your life who are speaking things into your life and trying to help you to be free, trying to help you to stay beautiful so that you can have the favor that you need to have and have that transformation happen to you, have that 6 months or what is it, 12 months period of baths and things that happen to her to prepare her for her future. So, uh, we all have these Mordecais. It's not just that the Spirit of the Lord is just hovering here and speaking to us in the night and no person speaks to us. But this is a picture of the role of pastors and leaders in our life to speak into our lives and how we need to think about them and listen to them and obey them so that our hearts are soft and our hearts are beautiful and our attitudes are beautiful. So the submission that Esther had to Mordecai and later on to Haggai prepared her to have submission in front of the king, which led her to have a great destiny in the end and be a rescuer for other people. Uh, so, but in the end, if you have these Mordecais in your life, you are never to just stay around the Mordecai for the rest of your life, hanging around the palace places, hanging around the church with your pastor and just doing services. But any pastor, any leader wants you to go before the king, wants you to advance into your royal position, wants you to be everything you want to be if they are filled with the Spirit of the Lord. So it's never our place just to hang around the courtroom with Mordecai, but to go further, to go before the king so that we can step into our position. Uh, so if we are humble, moldable, and thankful people, we will be liked. We will be advanced in the spirit realm forward and forward towards the throne of God. So it's so important that we let people around us who are filled with the Spirit, who has the wisdom more than we do, to mold our thinking, to mold our lives, and not be so, I know it all. I'm a Christian, I can read the Bible, but just let people speak into our lives and let them change you through the Spirit of God. So that just prepares you to even receive a great word directly from Jesus, to receive a calling. Be humble, be moldable, be ready to learn, and then you might hear a word from the king and get what you really want. So, how to choose these Mordecais into our life? Because there are so many voices right now, even in the Christian world, that want to speak faith and life to our lives. How to choose Mordecais in your life? So, this is what I got from the book of Esther. Uh, are they wanting you to be free and have a connection with the king and then represent the kingdom? That is what a Mordecai wants. Are they telling you to let go of your past and not talk about it all the time, but focus forward? Are they pushing you to face your fears? So, this is the voice of Mordecai in your life that you need to have, and I need to have, so that I can be an Esther and be transformed from Hadassah to Esther. So, we need to appreciate and be thankful for these Mordecais who God gives into our lives, and be listening to them and be listening to this kind of voice. This is what needs to happen to a Christian. They need to be transformed in this area and just be transformed into an Esther from the inside out. And also, when you are looking for the voices into your life, the Mordecais you want to have in your life, Mordecai was an example to Hadassah, because even after she was a queen, the Mordecai was a guy of integrity. And when the King Xerxes, there was a plan to assassinate King Xerxes, it is told in the end of chapter 2. Uh, Mordecai exposed the plan, wanted to protect the kingdom and the peace, even though he was a Jew who was exiled by this kingdom, and his family was exiled from his original home. But he was not bitter, and he didn't want to create chaos, and didn't want to harm the king, but wanted to save the king. And so later on, he was rewarded it greatly. And so Mordecai was a Jew who was very known in the Jewish community, so known that he could get them all together later on. Uh, so he was not a lonely runner. So anytime you choose a Mordecai into your life that gets to speak into your life, that gets to direct you to be transformed from the worldly Christian Vashti, from that spirit into being an Hadassah who is moldable and who is thankful and who has favor even before they have a title, even before they have a ministry, even before they have any success as Christian, even before they raise any dead person. they but just to have favor, and you want to have this voice. So pick somebody who is not on their own, but is under authority, is in a community, because when you are a part of a community, it saves you from every kind of weird own thinking, and you need to be plugged into a body and a community, which was the case of Esther and Mordecai. And this is just a great picture for us about what kind of attitude Hadassah has to have, we as Christians have to have, before we get to our queenly, royal calling and really start transforming lives, which is the end goal of every Christian, being a representative of the kingdom and transforming life. But there is a path to that position. And so, listen to the Mordecais in your life. I need to listen to the Mordecais in my life. And don't ever forget, and I need to always remember that I'm an adopted orphan into this family of God, and I need to stay full of gratitude of every direction that any pastor or mentor gives to me. Anything that directs me forward, I need to be thankful and moldable, and let others speak into my life who are greater in wisdom, filled with the Spirit, so that I can be changed, until I can be changed to be somebody else, to be that Esther that this generation needs, a royal person who can speak freedom into the lives of others. So let's end this section here. Chapter 2 in Esther has so many good things. So in the next episode, I will continue from the chapter 2 and speak a little bit more about Hadassah and how she was transformed to Esther. So thank you for listening to this podcast, this episode. And you can visit voicer.fi. I will be putting there the notes from this Bible study so you can go and look and remind yourself what I have been speaking. And I want to remind you, if you need something to read, something fun and entertaining to read, go and read my fantasy novel, A Clash of Book and Blade. You can find it in Amazon as an ebook or order it as a printed book, and it's just something that will open your eyes to the reason why humanity was created and why we are here. And it will be a great story to read for yourself, or if you have friends who are younger generation, young adults, give it to them so that they can also get that reason why we are here. So join me again next week. I'm so looking forward to studying more about the book of Esther, how to be transformed from Hadassah to Esther, and be the Esther this generation needs.